You know, there are just 98 days left until Election Day. Early voting starts even sooner. And the momentum behind the Kamala Harris campaign, it shows no signs of letting up. Tonight, 10,000 Harris supporters packed into an arena in Atlanta, Georgia. The vice president was introduced by three-time Grammy winner and rap megastar Megan Thee Stallion. Vice President Harris used that moment to issue a direct challenge to Donald Trump.
The momentum in this race is shifting. And there are signs that Donald Trump is feeling it. He pulled out of the debate in September he had previously agreed to. Well, Donald, I do hope you'll reconsider to meet me on the debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say, say it to my face.
Well, that rally comes as new battleground state polling shows that Kamala Harris has effectively wiped out Trump's lead in all of the key swing states. In Michigan, the latest Bloomberg Morning Consult poll finds Harris leading Trump by 11 points. That is a major shift in that state. In all 6 other battleground states polled, Harris and Trump are in a statistical tie within the margin of error. Harris leads by 2 points in Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Trump leads Harris by 4 points in Pennsylvania and by 2 points in North Carolina. The candidates, they are running dead even in Georgia. As the vice president's campaign heats up, the Republican candidate and his running mate, well, they are spending their time running away from their own unpopular statements and policies. For weeks, Democrats have been hammering the Trump campaign over Project 2025, the extreme policy agenda created by a conservative think tank as a blueprint for a second Trump administration. Today, the Daily Beast was first to report that the Trump campaign has officially forced that conservative think tank to part ways with an architect of Project 2025. According to that report, Trump campaign manager Chris LaCivita put the screws to mastermind Paul Dans in an effort to force him out and shut down the right-wing shop behind Project 2025. Following that reporting, the Trump campaign released a statement trying to publicly distance itself from the project, saying, quote, reports of Project 2025's demise would be greatly welcome. But if Trump really wants to cut ties with Project 2025, well, he might have to start firing people a little closer to home. A new book from the architects of Project 2025 promoting their extreme agenda is set to be released later this year. And the foreword to that new Project 2025 book was written by none other than Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance. Vance even promoted the book back when its original title was, get this, Dawn's Early Light, Burning Down Washington to Save America, with a cover image showing a match over the word Washington. The Trump campaign has already spent the past week in damage control mode over the choice for Trump's running mate. Vance, as you know, has tried to explain away bizarre and offensive statements he made denigrating adults who do not have children, referring to them derisively as childless cat ladies, even arguing that parents' votes should count for more than those of non-parents. Those comments appear to be more than just a one-off. Reporters have now unearthed even more video of J.D. Vance calling people without children deranged, psychotic, and sociopaths.
There's just these basic cadences of life that I think are really powerful and really, really valuable when you have kids in your life. And the fact that so many people, especially in America's leadership class, just don't have that in their lives, you know, I worry that it makes people more sociopathic and ultimately our whole country a little bit less less mentally stable. You go on Twitter and almost always the people who are most deranged and most psychotic are people who don't have kids at home.
We care about children because we're not sociopaths and we don't want to live in a society of sociopaths.
Joining me now, Democratic Senator from California, Alex Padilla. Senator, thank you so much for being with us. We will get to your fellow Senator J.D. Vance in just a second. But first, I want to talk about that new polling out today from Bloomberg News and Morning Consult. It shows Trump and Harris in competitive races across 7 swing states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That is a course, a stronger showing than we saw when that was a matchup between President Biden and former President Trump. I wonder what you think it is about Harris's candidacy that is really activating those voters.
Yeah, well, first of all, Lisa, good to be back with you. And the numbers are not surprising. I think the one thing that we didn't hear Kamala say is bring it on, because we know that Vice President Harris is bringing it to the campaign trail. And you see the numbers shifting. You see the excitement. I mean, you saw that crowd in Atlanta tonight. Well, more than 10,000 people at that rally. That felt like a mini convention already, while the Democratic convention is still a couple of weeks away. But I think the response to her entering the race, the quick consolidation of support amongst Democrats and what we're feeling on the ground, to me, it doesn't come as a surprise. I've known her leadership and the electric nature of her personality for many years from our days in California. You know, you don't get to be a successful DA in San Francisco, a successful attorney general in California, a U.S. senator for California, and then be picked by President Biden to be the vice president without the credibility, the experience, the credentials, and the ideas to move our country forward. That's what people are responding to. The race may be close today, but we're feeling increasingly positive about Democratic wins in November. We just have 98 days to continue to do the work.
Senator Padilla, there's new reporting. Harris planning to campaign with her running mate as early as next week. Your sense of the most important qualities she needs to be looking for as she vets those candidates?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of things. I mean, it's probably the most important and personal selection that she'll make in her career. Who will be her ultimate governing partner in the Harris administration in the next 4 years? And I think just as President Biden did with her, she's going to look first at somebody who is ready to step into the role of President of the United States if necessary. So there won't be a debate about qualifications or preparation. It'll be somebody that she feels comfortable with, will be a true governing partner, and a lot of great talent on the Democratic bench for her to choose from. I couldn't be more excited.
As you said, a lot of excitement that bears out in the polling that you and I were just talking about. It also bears out in the fundraising numbers we have seen since she announced her candidacy. And yet the campaign and Vice President Harris herself quick to remind us that she remains the underdog in this race. How do you see it?
Look, it's a mentality that we have to keep. And again, as someone who has been a first in so many steps in my career, first Latino president of the Los Angeles City Council, first Latino Secretary of State in California, first Latino represent California in the United States Senate. I know what she has gone through and has to fight to overcome to prove herself. Her election as DA in San Francisco, Attorney General in California, to become the first woman, African-American, Southeast Asian Vice President of the United States, and on the verge of making tremendous history for our country. That's a lot that you're working against, let alone the negativity, the hate from Trump and MAGA Republicans. It is not lost on us. Victory in November is not guaranteed. We know the stakes are high, but increasingly Democrats across the country and independents across the country are ready to put in the work to organize, fundraise, get out the vote, because we need to win this November.
Senator Padilla, I only have about a minute left, but I do want to get your take on your colleague J.D. Vance and the fact that Americans are continuing to learn about some of the comments he has made about childless people, specifically childless women. You surprised by any of it?
It's appalling. It is offensive. And as much as we've learned by now, I'm sure there's more coming from where that came from. But it's not shocking in the least bit, because we also know who Donald Trump is. And Donald Trump chose as his running mates nothing other than a yes man mini-me. And it's just a continued reflection of what we know Donald Trump is all about. He's not about governance. He's not about inclusivity. He's not about anything positive. He's about hate, bitterness, division. His only agenda, tax breaks for the wealthy and extremist judges that are part of why we're in this position to begin with. Democracy is at stake. Democracy is on the ballot this November, and we're going to do what it takes to win.
I have asked you a lot about the odds, so thank you for refocusing us on the stakes. California Senator Alex Padilla, as always, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Alicia.